Hi. So I'm going to go over Prep Test 77 Game 3 now. This is definitely one of the hardest games that's ever been written, that's ever been administered. I would say probably top 10 or even top 5. One of the things that makes it really challenging is that it's quite unusual. So there are some elements here that we just don't see in other games. If you do find that there are some similarities between this game and other games, I would actually really appreciate, and I'm sure other people would appreciate, if you were to comment down below and just comment, the prep test number and the game number, and sort of suggest what they have in common, because this one is so unusual. I don't really have a suggestion of another game to do that's like this one. It's really that unique. So keeping that in mind, I will talk about how to do it. And I'll try to let you know what I did the first time that I wrote this game, that probably helped me to be more successful on it than I otherwise would have been, I guess, even though I'd never seen anything like it before. What did I do? So the stuff here may not be applicable to most of the games that you would be writing, but if you do come across something that's strange, that you've never seen before, maybe some of the things that I say would be useful for that. Okay, so to start off, we've got 4 employees, right? So I'm thinking that these may be my players, but can't be 100% sure of that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So, all right, we've got J, L, P, and T. I've got 4 of them. What's next? They're going to select from among 4 offices. Okay, so there is a selection element, which sort of is, grouping or matching maybe. So they're selecting from these 4 offices. So we've got another set of items here, 4 of them, potentially a 1-to-1 ratio, which might be handy, right? This is all a little bit big. Sorry, I'm just gonna move it down a notch. There we go. Okay. All right, so getting the lay of the land here. The order in which they select. Okay, so there does seem to be an ordering component. The order in which they select from first to fourth is to be decided by a random drawing. So that's really unusual, right? Random. So if you have seen that in another game, please let me know, because nothing comes to mind off the top of my head here. But yeah, random drawing. So usually the order would be determined by the conditions, right? Or the rules, but in this case, it's just random. Each employee has ranked the offices from first to fourth as follows. So this has nothing to do with the order, at least not yet. This is just which ones they like best to worst. Okay, so the ranking is different from the order. All right, and then within the ranking, I might kind of take a little bit of time to look for, is there something strange? So I do see like W is last, except for with Larrabee, and I see that Y is quite popular, except with Larrabee. So Larrabee seems like kind of an interesting player, like maybe a player to sort of watch out for potentially. So that would be one of my first thoughts. For first place, X and Y are top. And then for second place, we have Y here, Y, X, Z. So 3 options that people are looking at for second. For third place, the only one that puts W is Larrabee. Okay. I mean, this reminded me of a situation where teachers in our class would have us like anonymously select people that we wanted to work with or to be grouped with. And so they would like anonymously have us write down our first choice, second choice, third choice, and then based on those things, they would group us together. And in my particular group of friends, we were a little bit intense and nerdy about it. And so we actually rotated through the group to kind of try to make sure that we were all together. This sort of starts to remind me of that. Okay, the following restrictions must apply. Each employee selects an office that hasn't been selected previously. Okay, so this is going to tell me that we can't have two people select the same office. So this tells me we have a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, so each employee selects a new office. Each employee selects only one office. Okay, so that's good. I guess these two together maybe would be our 1-to-1 ratio, right? So they select an office that hasn't been selected before. So we can't have two, we can't have more than one person in an office. And then the second rule is that we cannot have any person have more than one office, right? So that's how we get our 1-to-1 ratio, right? We have one employee per office because you can't have two employees per office based on rule 1, and you can't have two offices per employee based on rule 2. So yeah, those things together eliminate the possibility of anything besides a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, 3, each employee selects the office that he or she ranks highest among the unselected offices. Okay, so remember the order is random. So if I were to just do an example, and this is something that I would actually typically do with a weird game that I come across, is that I would say, okay, well, let me just try to create at least one acceptable solution, maybe 2 or 3 to kind of get a handle on what's going on. So if J selects first, then J would select Y. And then let's do P, and then T, and then L. So J would select Y, P can't select Y, so then selects Z. T would select X, right? So even though T picks third, T's first choice X is still available. So they select the office they rank highest among the unselected ones. So X hasn't been selected yet, so it's still up for grabs. Then Larrabee. Larrabee can't select X because T has it, can select Z because P has it, but can select W. Okay, so J picked first, but got first choice. P picked second and got second choice. T picked third, but got first choice. And L picked fourth and got third choice. Okay, so a couple things there. I know that every time I start a new random drawing, right, to come up with a new scenario, that someone's going to get their first choice. So whoever picks first gets their first choice. And then whoever picks second might get their second choice. But if I put J first and then L or T, they would actually get their first choice because they rank X highest, and X hasn't been selected yet because J selected Y. So what I could do is I could create a few different scenarios where I'm starting with J first, and then I switch up who picks second. So if T picks second, T gets X, which is first choice. Who picks third? We could have L pick third, let's say. So Z, which is second, and then 4 would be P again. And what would P get? So P would end up with W, which is fourth choice. Okay, so we are seeing that, like, even though there's always just one person picking first, one person picking second, third, and fourth, that the choice that they end up with isn't, first, second, third, and fourth necessarily, right? So I could have more than one person getting their first choice. I definitely don't have to have anybody getting their fourth choice or anybody getting their third. So I am learning things as I'm creating these scenarios. One thing to note, of course, is that this does take time, right? Um, I think it's valuable to create a couple of different scenarios at the beginning when you really don't have a handle on what's going on with the game, rather than actually going to the options here for question 13. I think it's better actually to just, based on the rules, come up with a couple scenarios on your own, because these scenarios are acceptable and 4 out of 5 of these are not, right? We have a bunch of rule breakers in here. Yeah, and then the thing I think that really gets a lot of people off guard here is that this first question isn't asking you about the order, right? So we've got to read really carefully. Which one of the following is a possible matching of employees with the offices they select? Any order is possible because the order is random, but the matching is based on the ranks that they've given, right? So I've got to find one here where I have for sure one person gets their first choice. And then I kind of want to go from there, right? So for A, Jackson picking W would mean Jackson is fourth. So why don't I go ahead and add some text in here just for now. So yeah, Jackson picking W would mean Jackson's getting fourth choice. Larrabee picking Y would mean Larrabee's also getting their fourth choice, which doesn't make sense, right? PX is P getting third choice, and TZ is T getting third choice. So nobody got their first choice. So who picked first, right? Whoever picks first would pick their first one, their first choice. So yeah, this one is like backwards. So I can eliminate it. B, J picking Z would be third, L picking X is first. Okay, so this one has potential. We have somebody picking their first choice. So let's say L picks first. P picking W would be last. T picking Y would be second. So let's say T picks second. Would T then pick Y if L has already taken X? Yes. All right, so that one works. And then Jackson picks Z. Would it make sense that Jackson would pick Z after X and Y are taken? Yes, it would. So Jackson would pick third, Z, and get third choice. And then P, after all of that is taken, P would end up with W. Okay, so P, and I should be doing lowercase for these guys to distinguish. I'm just going to erase this in a second. So this is really not worth it, but that'll help me practice for the next round. Okay, and P picks W, which is fourth choice. So this one does actually work. I can walk myself through this, and this is an acceptable scenario. So B is the correct answer. And in this case, because we've already taken so much time, I would pick this and move on. So typically I do recommend actually sticking with the first question for a little bit longer. But here, just, yeah, pick and move on. Something else to note about this game within the context of this section is that it's only got 5 questions, and it is really weird. So I would definitely do game 4 before I do game 3 in this section. Like I would do game 1, game 2, skip game 3, do game 4, and then come back to game 4 if I had time. That's how I would do it. Okay. So yeah, I think that's something that maybe you can try out, that you can practice, and you can see if it improves your score to skip the game with the fewest questions out of the last two, and then come back to it. If they have the same number of questions, the last two, then I would skip the one that looks harder. Okay, so here it just looks weird, right? It's not what we typically see. Whereas with the last game, that's much more typical, right? We've got a bit more information up here, and then we have exactly 4 rules. We have an if, which is handy. So yeah, definitely looks a lot more doable. Okay. But let's continue with this guy. So I'm just going to erase those because they'll just get in the way and move on to the next question. I do have an example here of an acceptable solution. So I probably should have just moved that text down, but we have our 2 acceptable scenarios here for our bank of acceptable solutions. So we'll save those and move forward. Okay. All right, which of the following must be true? At most, one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks first. Well, I know that that doesn't have to be true because I have already created 2 scenarios where that is false. Okay, so I don't have a maximum of one person getting the one that they rank first, right? I have actually a minimum of one person getting the one that they rank first. So here we have 2 people getting their first choice, and here we have 2 people getting their first choice. So I can eliminate A. Okay, B. At most, one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks second. So that one, I don't have an example to show, but we have X, Z, and Y as options that people have for their second place. So yeah, I can imagine maybe that that more than one person gets their second place. I think it could be possible to actually come up with that scenario. Might be a bit challenging, but I don't know for sure that that isn't the case. So I'm going to leave it. And then C, at least one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks first. That absolutely has to be true, right? Whoever randomly gets to go first is going to select their first choice. So that would be for sure the correct answer. And so in the real thing, I didn't go through all of the other ones and like try to falsify them. And yeah, so like the falsification process for this one would be trying to go over the maximum or go under the minimum. Okay, so I'll try doing that now. It will take some time, so just note that like you wouldn't spend as much time on it in the real thing, but I will go through the process so you can see how to falsify a statement about a maximum or a minimum. So when I say falsify, I'm going to try to create a scenario where this is not true. Okay, so I'm going to try to prove that this doesn't have to be true all the time because I can create an acceptable scenario where it doesn't hold. Okay, so at most, one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks second. So I'm going to try to create a scenario where more than one person selects their second choice. All right, so how am I going to do that? I already created a couple where J is first. Okay, so I'm going to start with L. So L gets to select first, and L selects X, which is their first choice. Okay, then after that, I want somebody to get their second choice. So I'm going to select T to be second because T would have to select their second choice Y because their first choice is X and that's already taken. Then third, I want somebody who's going to get their second choice. So if I select J, J would end up with their third choice and I don't want that. But if I select P, P would select Z, right? Because P ranks Y first, Y is already taken, but Z hasn't been taken yet. So P picks third and gets Z, which is their second choice. Then J would pick last, and J ends up with W, their fourth choice. So I could have this as the selection, along with that information about like who selected first and the ranking and all of that. So this scenario allows me to disprove B, or to falsify B. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, I actually can't eliminate anymore because I already selected and showed answer, but B is out. Okay, how do I falsify D? So at least one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks second. So I have to come up with a scenario where nobody gets their second choice. Okay, so I have examples here, like here nobody got their fourth choice and here nobody got their third choice. So how do I make it so nobody gets their second choice? Well, I probably need to have more than one person get their first choice, right? And then the next person would have to get their third choice, something like that. So let's give this a try. So we'll try the first person be, let's just see if T is the first person. Okay, so T gets their first choice. And then, and that would be X. Okay. Then we want somebody else to get their first choice. So we want to pick either J or P because they would pick Y. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick P because I think if I pick J after that, then X and Y would be taken and J would have to pick their third choice. So I'm kind of thinking ahead here based on what I already know as I'm trying to create this solution. So P would then pick Y, which is their first choice. And then if I get J picking third, X and Y are already taken. So we skip second choice, right? X and Y are taken, so they would pick Z, third choice. And then Larrabee picks fourth. And Larrabee is a bit odd. So Larrabee gets their third choice, which is W, right? Larrabee's odd in that Larrabee likes W better than Y, which is really unusual. Okay, so that is, that's another interesting scenario that we could have. And then E says at least one of the employees selects the office he or she ranks third. And we have an example already that disproves that. Okay, so this example, this scenario right here, the second one, shows that we could have 0 employees get the office they rank third. Okay. All right, and we've got some acceptable solutions that we can continue to keep for the next round. Okay, I'm just gonna erase that and get back to my mouse. Okay. Next one. Oh, I need to erase those X's. Okay, what could be true? Exactly 2 of the employees each selects the office he or she ranks third. That could be true. I already have that example. So I know that A is the correct answer there. So that's one example of how having a bank of acceptable solutions can speed things up as you go further along. Okay. This one, I think when I originally did it, I was just like, well, that's the one that seems like the most possible out of the options that we have here, just based on my understanding of how the game would work like in real life if we were doing this. So I think the idea is that everybody gets kind of the most opportunity to get an office that they like, no matter at what point they select, right? They're trying to make it fair, which also makes sense with like the random drawing of orders. So yeah. So 2 people getting the one that they rank fourth doesn't make sense, right? Because the only time that you get your fourth choice is if you pick last, right? Nobody's getting their fourth choice if they pick third, right? Because only 2 offices have been selected at that point. So if you pick first, you get your first choice every time. If you pick second, you get your first or second choice. If you pick third, you could get your first, second, or third choice. And if you pick last, you get your third or fourth. Okay. So could 3 people get the one that they rank second? No, right? That's actually just too many people getting the same rankings, and same with D and E. That just doesn't make sense. Okay, so we'll keep moving. If P selects office W, okay, then which one of the following could be true? So P selecting W, that only happens if P selects fourth. Okay. And then, I mean, we could look at what would happen here like this. We do have one example of that already. So it is a could be true question. So maybe the answer is in here, right? Maybe the correct answer is something that's true in this one scenario that we have. And we kind of lucked out because it is. So L selecting Z is possible. We already know that that's possible here. So what I would do for this game is that I would test D and E before I test the other ones, because the other ones are just more complicated in trying to test them. So I would actually test these guys instead. And so I would kind of say, well, in order for J to select X, what would have to happen? And so I look at what J ranks X. And so Y would have to be taken before J gets a chance to select, but X would have to be available. So the only way for that to work is if P selects first. But if P selects W, then P doesn't select first, P selects last. So D is not possible. Then I would try E. In order for Larrabee to select Z, what has to happen? Well, Larrabee would select Z if X was taken, but Z was still available. So if T selects before Larrabee does, then X would be taken, but Z could still be available. So I could say, okay, we have T, then L, then J, then P. That would also be an acceptable solution where P selects W and L selects Z. Alrighty. So yeah, E is correct, and I wouldn't worry about these guys. But now I do know that all of those things are false, right? So if I hadn't, if I didn't know that before, now I know all of these things are impossible, because this thing is possible. And I could even, if I hadn't answered the previous questions, I might be able to go back and say, oh, those things are impossible, you know, and work backwards a little bit. But yeah, that's how I would solve this one. Okay. 17. Which one of the following must be true? So again, I can use my bank of acceptable solutions to falsify a little bit. So if I have a situation where J has selected X, then I can eliminate it. In order for J to select X, then all I have to do is have P first, then J. So that one I could totally make happen. So I could totally falsify it quite easily. B, L does not select W. So what would I have to do to get L to select W? I just have to get it to select third or fourth, really. As long as X and Z are already taken, then it would select W. And I do have a bunch of examples, or well, I guess not a bunch, but I have 2 examples where L selects W. C, L doesn't select Z. So is there an example where L selects Z? I actually do have an example of that. Okay, so I can remove that one. Do I have an example where T selects X? Yes, I do, right there. So I can eliminate that one. Where P selects X, do I have an example of that? So I know by process of elimination that E is the correct answer, but why, right? Like, why is it impossible for P to select X, right? Why must it be true that P doesn't select X? Now, the reason that must be true is actually because P ranks X third, but everybody else has X either first or second. So in order for P to select X, Y and Z would need to be taken, but X would need to be still available. And if either L or T goes before P, then X is definitely taken because they rank X the highest. So if X is still available, they're going to snap it up. And if J selects before P, then yes, P would get Z, but yeah, Z's not going to be taken by the time, yeah, so like, let's say T goes first, well, X is taken. If L goes first, X is taken. If J goes first, Y is taken, okay? But then if P went after that, P wouldn't select X, P would select Z. And if we put another one of these guys in front of P, then X would end up being taken and P would still select Z. So there's just no scenario I can create where P would end up with X because everybody else likes it better. Yeah. It's actually the same with L, like, and Y. L would never select Y because everybody else ranks Y higher than L does. And L, if it's last, is going to end up with W, right? Because they like W better than Y. Oh, okay. And nobody else would select W because they all would select it only if they are last. That would be the only time they would end up with W. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. As you can see, I used like almost 35 minutes to explain it. So when you're actually going through these questions on the real thing, like it would be good to do it a little bit more just like intuitively, right? So that first one is sort of, okay, what choice is this? What choice is this? What choice is this? And who, you know, getting their first choice. If I go through the answers here, I think this is the only one. Yeah, it's really the only one where obviously it's the only one that works, but there are a few like giveaways, like here, again, nobody's getting their first choice. Here, Jackson gets first choice, then Larrabee gets third, Paulson gets third, and Torillo gets third. So nobody picked their second choice. So if Jackson went first and picked Y, the next person to go would pick either X or Z. So it would be either their first choice or their second, right? We're not getting three people picking their third. E, J picks Y, that's their first choice. L picks Z, second choice. P picks X, which is third choice. And T picks W, which is fourth choice. So this would be one where you would have to kind of run through the scenario to show that that's not how it would work, right? So if J picked first and picked Y, then the next person to go is picking, you know, like if Larrabee went next, Larrabee wouldn't pick their second choice. Larrabee would pick their first choice, X, because it's still available. And then P, if X and Y were taken, would actually select Z because they rank Z higher than X and it's still available. And then T picking fourth would select W. But yeah, this one, if you work through the scenario, you can prove it to be false. But like I said, as soon as I came up with one where I was like, oh yeah, that does work, I'm selecting it and moving on. I don't want to spend too much time there. This one, yeah, it's a must be true question. So maybe we would want to falsify, and I did show you how to falsify, but it's a lot faster to just kind of go with like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's the correct answer. Move on. Here as well, this one seems the most possible. So 14 and 15, it just kind of went on intuition. 16, like I said, ignore A, B, C, and then try D and E because they're easier to test. And so that's going to take you a little bit less time. And turns out E is the correct answer. So we can just ignore the rest and move on. And then this one, I would be fine going through and falsifying for this one. I think it's okay, you know, to just come up with a scenario where J does select X, or L does select W, right? That's how we falsify these guys. Because when we kind of try to disprove a negative, you have to show one positive example, right? So if you think of like I'm thinking of the white swan fallacy, which is like, oh, I've only ever seen white swans, therefore all swans are white. And the only thing that you need to do to disprove that is to come up with a black swan. But yeah, here it would be like, okay, there's what each of them is saying is there are no black swans. And so to prove it, I just have to show one example of a black swan. And so in this case, yeah, it's J doesn't select X. So I just have to show one example where J does, and it works, right? Still follows all the rules. But with E, to get P to select X, I'd have to break a rule. Okay, so yeah, I mean, over 35 minutes now, but I hope that some of the things that I've said will carry through to other games. I think the big takeaways, if I can kind of summarize sort of the advice that I would give, would be to skip. Like, don't be afraid to skip. So what are you skipping? Fewest questions and odd setup, like just odd looking rules. Okay, so skip those ones, so save them for last. The second thing would be create acceptable scenarios, 2 to 3, based on the rules. Okay, so you're going to try to kind of build a little bit of a bank of acceptable solutions, but also just try to understand the rules a little bit better before you start the questions. And then 3 would be like educated guesses, right, based on intuition. I think the big thing with this is I'm imagining a scenario where you really don't have a lot of time to complete this one because you skipped it and you came back to it at the end, right? Never want to leave anything blank. So at the end of the day, guessing is better than leaving it blank, okay? So guess, don't leave anything blank. Yeah. And then to do better on these ones, really, you just are going to need more time, right? So how are you going to get more time? Improve on the fundamentals to go faster through games 1 and 2 so that you have time for 3 and 4. Okay. Games 1 and 2 are typically going to be the easier ones, right? And then between 3 and 4, one of them is likely to be, harder. You may have a game that's just very time consuming. Okay, it's still fundamental skills, but it's like really hybrid, and the questions are a bit more time consuming to answer. So yeah. Hopefully that is helpful, and I'll stop rambling now. This is getting so long. Okay, yeah, have a good one, and let me know if you have any questions.